Hello, everyone, and good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're watching this in the world. And welcome to another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And today, I am so very happy for this episode, viewers and listeners, because joining us today is an illustrator making their official debut here on the show. She is the first and hopefully not the last illustrator to be featured on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Now, my guest today is an LA local born in Northridge and raised in the Santa Clarita Valley. She graduated from CSUN Northridge, majoring in art program with a concentration of 2D animation. She previously interned as a digital artist for the YouTube web series The Mista Pat Project, and currently works as a freelance animator for the YouTube channel Psych2Go. She is incredibly talented, and I've had the opportunity to look more of her work and some of her other stuff, which she is also an author, which is really amazing, really exciting. So without further ado, I am so incredibly happy to have this person on the show. So let's give a huge Wandering Scribe welcome to today's guest, animator and illustrator, Danica Diamos. Danica, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Awesome, Danica. Again, I am so excited to have you here on the show and to learn more about your background and what really pushed you into the world of illustration and 2D animation.
Yeah, so I have cousins who are also artists, and they've worked for various studios around LA. And one of them also did a bunch of comics, and she would post them on like her Facebook. And that inspired me a lot as a kid. And I would always go to her house to see her sister, since her sister was around my age and she was a little older. But every time I went over there, I would always do like art projects with the both of them. And in school, I was also a really artsy kid, and that just kind of followed from elementary up until high school. And I really loved it. I always wanted to do it. And so I just went ahead and pursued it.
Awesome. Awesome. So before we dive further into your career and background, let's talk a little bit about you, the person behind the artist. So as you just mentioned now that you've been a creative kid, an artsy kid for a long time, since, very, very young. I'm very curious, was there a specific person or instance that really brought about this passion? And as a little fun little question, is there possibly a fun fact that not a lot of people know about you?
For that question, I think mentioned before, my cousin, the specific person that kind of really sparked my passion for it. By the time that I made it to middle school, she had got her first job working at Cartoon Network. And
Wow.
that was the moment where it was just like, oh, you can actually do this for a living. And that just blew my mind. So ever since then, I've wanted to follow in her same footsteps also. One fun fact about me, I guess, well, I am a gamer. I like to play games a lot. It's one of my main hobbies. Other than that, I also play musical instruments. I'm not really known for it, so people don't really associate me with it, but I occasionally play the guitar, and I have an ocarina, which I bought after I played Ocarina of Time. So I like how my hobbies, they kind of go mixed together, and that just makes me who I am. Anything storytelling, anything creative, I usually, how do I phrase this? I'm always drawn to them. Yeah, that's the word. I'm always drawn to those kinds of things.
Awesome. Awesome. So now let's go into, a day in the life, as you would say. So whenever you're working on, let's say you're either working with an author for like a cover of their book, or maybe you're working with a client for a project of theirs, how do you generate sort of new ideas for various illustration projects and animation projects that you are a part of?
First and foremost, usually I get the story or the script, and then I read through it to see what it's about and what they're trying to go for. I always have to have it printed out so
Mhm.
that I can sketch directly on top of it. Like I make thumbnails around the size of literally my thumb just to like sketch out various ideas of what I could how I could interpret their script basically. And then I just get my sketches, put it all together. Maybe sometimes, depending on what the client needs, sometimes they prefer to have it a little bit cleaned up. So if they would like to do that, then I would clean it up and then present it to them and see what ideas they would like or what they would prefer to not include, or if they have a new idea that they would like to add on to, then they would ask me like, hey, can you do a new sketch based on, or like they would say like, hey, I like your idea, but I have another idea, maybe you could sketch it out too. And then, just keep going back to the drawing board until they have something that they like. And then they're just like, all right, this is good. We can go ahead and finally render it and clean it all up and make it all pretty. Yeah.
All right, nice. And then once you've, finalized, the design that both of you are happy, both parties are happy, do you have a ritual or routine that you follow to stay productive? Do you only work certain hours of the day? Are you more of a morning person, a night owl? What's your go-to routine for you?
Um, it's mostly when I have the free time, since I also have another job outside of these roles. Um, I try to find time either before work or after work, so that would either be in the morning or the evening. But since I am a night owl, I mostly steer towards working in the evening, since ironically that's when my energy picks up a bit more. So that's basically my routine whenever I have things to work on outside of my day job.
I feel you. I feel you. I'm very much the same way. As an author, I typically write, later in the evening. And I find, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I find that working in the evening allows the creativity to, really flesh out, because it's the end of the day. You're not really thinking as much into like the beginning of the morning, but every person is different. And I'm wondering if that's almost like the same for you whenever you're working, pending long hours or like all-nighters.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of ideas just end up exploding all at once in my head by the time the evening comes around. When I was in college and I was thinking up of ideas to make for films that I have to do for class, a lot of my best ideas came around as late as 1 in the morning. So um so I could just be in my bed sketching in my sketchbook all the ideas that I have around that time. So yeah, for sure, it's a legit thing that night owls, they can really get creative by the evening.
Absolutely. Very true. And probably a major question, which we'll probably be exploring later in the interview, for you and like for a lot of us independents and freelancers, what was the most challenging aspect of freelancing as an illustrator, an animator, an artist in general?
Um, the greatest challenge could be communication, because everything is remote and I'm working from my home, and my other clients, they can live in all sorts of different parts of the world. Sometimes our messages don't really get received at a timely manner. And so that can cause some misunderstandings and such. And also, like, it kind of tests your patience as well. Because with the time zones, sometimes I could be awake and then the other
Mm.
person could probably be asleep, and you're not going to get a response till the next day. But then you're just like, oh no, there's a deadline. I just want to keep working now and maybe get the response later. But it's just really a test of patience. It's like you can't move forward until you get that response. So you just got to wait it out and see. And sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it isn't. Some clients, they're just never really clear from the start, and those are the ones where it's just like, it's not really worth going through with this kind of collaboration at this moment. It's a lot of battle picking also, so there's that to consider for sure.
Absolutely. Very, very true. I imagine there have been long discussions where you were probably halfway through, like many others, and you feel as if you've been ghosted. There's no more communication. And I talked to a lot of others, especially narrators who have had similar instances, editors who have had similar instances. It is a shame that happens, and unfortunately it does. And I also like how you mentioned, you have to pick your battles. You have to know which one is really important to you and which one can you just let go. Because there are going to be some moments where you do have to let go and just move on and, persevere. And I'm very curious, Danica, for you, how do you deal with the creative blocks when working on new projects? Because I don't care what anyone says, anyone in the creative industry, we're always going to have those moments of writer's block, editor's block, narrator's block, artistic block. Something is going to put a hold on our process.
Yeah, for things like that, if I want to keep my hand like, all warmed up so that if I do have an idea, then, it's ready to go. It's not like stiffed and like, it forgets what it's doing. I like to do observational drawings and like life drawings. So like, the sessions where like you're in a whole room and there's like a nude model and all you have to do is like, try to capture their anatomy, or if they're clothes, you try to capture like their clothes. It's like for that, like there is some thinking, but at the same time, that's an opportunity to just turn my brain off, just let my hand dance on the paper, things like that. If I don't attend those types of classes, then I just draw what's in front of me. Like just simple things like maybe my shelf, or like, the shelves in the back, or maybe my bed, or like the bathroom. It's like, it's a nice warm up. I don't really have to think about what I'm doing. It's just draw what's in front of me. And, that's it. That keeps my hand, that keeps me in practice, and also continues to strengthen my visual library, so that, the next time if I need to draw something from memory, then it's like with the practice and the hand-eye coordination, I already have it. And then there are other days where just even doing that gets tiring. And at that point, it's just like, take a break, delve into other hobbies. I read books too. That's another thing I forgot to mention about when asked about hobbies, but I read books too. Just sit down, read a nice book, playing my games, or going outside. That's a big help too, because we definitely need breaks for sure.
That is very true. I 100% agree. I've had to take a step back from my own writing, or just writing on other projects, and just read. I could just read for hours if I wanted to. I could read for sometimes 2 hours, which that has happened. And I realized I can't stay up late, else I'm never going to get rest to go to my other job. And I do have to agree, taking breaks is important, because you don't want to burn yourself out, and you definitely don't want to lose passion or the drive. And that is something that we're going to be touching on, especially when we get into, the business side of this industry. And going back to clients again, whenever you're working with a client, either a returning client or a new client, ultimately, what is the goal you're making to yourself as the person working on this new project, and the promise you're making not just to yourself, but also to the client, or the clients if it's more than one?
I guess for the first part of that question, a goal for myself is to just keep improving and keep learning, because like the way I approach my own work is just like, great, this is cool, this is good, what could I do the next time for the next client that could improve this even further. It's like every single project I do, I always give myself that kind of challenge and that question in mind of like, how could this be better? How could this have been any better? And that's pretty much how I measure my progress over time. Even since being a young artist, it's always that challenge of what could I do better for this person? And for the clients in question, my goal for them is that they receive a high quality product from me and that they feel that there is care put into what they're receiving. With the rise of things like AI and AI
Mhm.
slop, it's just like it's just an image that's being spat out, and then the machine's, oh, here you go, just take it. But for me, as a real illustrator, that's never been the case. I always want to put quality care and attention into what I do, and I would hope that the client can see that in my work.
Absolutely. I'm actually glad you brought up AI because that's going to be a big question and big discussion that we're going to be talking about in this interview. And that's a little fun little question, Danica. Do you have a favorite illustration that you've worked on, and what makes it so special?
A favorite illustration, I would say so far it's not a single illustration, but rather my first book that I published,
Ooh.
the one that I where I illustrated and written everything. Because, well, number one, it's about my mom. About it was originally a comic for Mother's Day that I made for her. I made that in 2019, but then by 2024, I decided to update it and actually turn it into a book. So I updated the drawings for it, and I made it a little bit better than the first comic that I made back in high school. And it was very touching for me to just work on, because like this is about the relationship between me and my mom. It was,
Nice.
yeah, the premise of that comic was that, like, you know, sometimes she can be firm, and like if I needed disciplining, sometimes I have the tendency to take it personally, even though it's like, well, it's not supposed to be. It's just I need to move on the right direction here when my mom was raising me. And I just felt bad and I took it personally. But then my mom would give me the lesson of like, no, I'm not like doing this on purpose to be mean. I just want you to be the best that you can be. And the metaphor that she used was like a tree. You know, sometimes when you're growing a tree and they're at the really young stage where their bark or their, yeah, the trunk is like really small. So it can have the tendency to like be um like tilted or like off balance. So you would have to take like a string and a pole to,
Mm.
you know, set it in place. That was kind of her metaphor of discipline to me, where it's just like, maybe it's going to be maybe it's going to be painful, but this is an important lesson that I needed to learn so that I can grow up to be a good adult. And, you know, like the tree in her metaphor, the tree can be nice and strong and up straight and not like tilted as if, you know, the wind keeps on pushing it. So I took that and put that into my book, and it's the most special to me that I can think of this far because of how personal it was.
Nice. That's very awesome, Danica. That's incredible. And kind of following suit from that, what's really been the most challenging project you've ever worked on? And just like before, why was it so challenging?
The most challenging project that I worked on recently, working for the YouTube channel Psych2Go. Sometimes they have like videos that are like super long, like longer than I'm used to. The average that I'm usually used to working on is between 6 to 8 minutes. And then they gave me a project that was 12 minutes. That's really long, and I am the only person working on it. I have to do the storyboarding, the animating, background design, the character design. I'm doing everything. It's just my by myself. The only thing I'm not working on is the voice and the script writing. Everything else was on me, and they typically give kind of small deadlines, like 2 weeks to do. Probably because of their posting schedule and what they needed for their channel. But that was really stressful. And especially since I have other things that I need to do outside of that client work, taking care of my family and going to my day job, it was really tough to find free time to work on that, especially with its length. So I would say that was the most challenging for sure.
All right. That does sound like pretty challenging, especially if you're the only one doing all that stuff. That's a lot of pressure and a lot of weight. And that's something we're going to be talking about very soon. Before I get to that, I did want to mention when you began this career, when you became a freelance artist, what was the reaction like from friends and family who learned about this? And also, when did you tell them? Because I can't imagine, just like for anyone who wants to be like an author, narrator, editor, artist, whatever in this industry, there is that hesitancy to let people know from the get-go what you're working on. I talked with people on the show who have said that they didn't tell their friends and family that they were this until it was either their first book was out or their first reel was done, where it's been the opposite. They told them straight from the beginning. For you, Danica, what was that reaction like, and when did you tell
them? Depending on who I'm telling, the answer can vary. Like with friends, they are very supportive, so I'll tell them right away. And regardless of, if the things I work on is a great deal for me or not, they still have my back. And if I want to continue pushing further to get into better positions, then they're with me on that every step of the way. With family, this is where things can get a bit rocky because they have a specific expectation for, the family members like my age, and they have a specific kind of vision for what they want their kids to be. And to be honest, I didn't really fit that. So it was pretty hard to tell them, like, completely update them on like the things that I'm working on, because they're always going to find something to criticize about it. And even when I tell them like, okay, this is just an investment to, move forward to a better, something better for myself, they still don't really believe in it. So for things like that, I don't really tell them directly. Some of them follow me on my social media and they see the updates that I'm working on. It's like, okay, they just see it and then they can take it or leave it however they choose to see it as. But personally, for family, I won't tell them directly. More so, I would prefer if they find out.
Okay.
Yeah, like if news spills out and they hear about it, that's when they take it or leave it. But I would prefer that I don't tell them to their face so that they don't tell anything to my face. So that's how that is.
I understand. That makes sense. Sense. And now jumping forward, we now tackle on some reflective questions, but I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on, Danica. Now, the first one is, of course, what it means to be a creative, a freelancer in the digital age, because the industry has changed for all of us, for authors, editors, narrators, and artists. The industry has greatly changed. And, 20 years ago, it would have been inconceivable to, either have like an author's website or a website in general. Portfolios usually were the old standard copies where you actually had like a binder with all of your artwork. But now more than ever, as technology has advanced, especially in animation, you still have those that practice, 2D animation traditional on pencil and paper. But you now have this, well, it has been shifting to, 3D and hyper realistic. But there's also been a resurgence of traditional 2D animation that people are now really, really pulling towards. And the reason I bring this up is that for every creative in the industry on every aspect, we want to showcase what we can do and who we are. But social media is a double-edged sword. It's very exhausting, it is time consuming, and it is emotionally draining. We leave ourselves exposed to the negative side of social media. And I'm sure you probably talked with others in the industry, fellow artists, creatives, what have you, who have also had similar instances or maybe even worse ones. And as we mentioned also before, the creative block, that also touches on the aspect of imposter syndrome, which I don't care what people say, imposter syndrome is real and it does affect us. And it can make us doubt ourselves and our abilities and question if we made the right decision. So for you, Danica, I would like to hear your thoughts on this and if you've had those moments of heightened anxiety or imposter syndrome. And if so, or if not, what has disciplined you to be the best artist you can be, to really show people in this industry that this is the place to be and you want to grow and really make a name for yourself?
Yeah, like what keeps me what keeps me to keep pursuing these things, like despite all of that you've mentioned.
Mm.
I guess it's just the human response to fight for what I believe in.
Mhm.
And what I believe in is, spreading a positive and influencing message of the importance of human creativity, because you cannot take that away. And you can just see from, years, decades, millennia of like creation from the beginning of time, like cave paintings to, the statues to like, Gothic architecture, things like that. It's like you can see in those societies that humans love to create and
Mhm.
humans love beauty. They are drawn to beauty. So to have modern society now where things are just done out of convenience, not only just with AI, but also like with the minimalistic architecture
Mhm.
and buildings looking just all square everywhere. Um, I've seen online responses of people agreeing that it's just kind of a sad world to live in. It's just like this is where we are now, where everything's just white and beige and sterile, and it's a negative response from a majority of people, from what I've noticed. And it's like I feel as an artist and as a creative that keep I want to keep the creation and the creative mindset in this modern society of, I guess for lack of better words, sterility. It's like we need color, we need intricate, interesting designs, we need something fun and poppy. Even as recent as like maybe the 90s, it's like,
Yes.
and you see their movies and TV shows, and it's like it's more colorful. The what is it? The trends, I guess, of like how people decorate their houses. You can see it's much more colorful. The lights were more warm, and if you compare that to now, it's just really set. It's like looking at a hospital now. It's
Yes.
like every house looks like a hospital because they will literally not paint their walls with anything but white. And it's just like, as an artist, no, we need to bring that color back. And with going back to the love of like um audiences wanting like 2D animation to come back and stuff, it's like not 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 to put 3D down, because I do love 3D projects
Mhm.
also, but like it's not there to replace 2D, and it's not there just because it's more convenient. It's just an art form of its own. And I think now, um people are starting to recognize that, and they're starting to realize and say like, hey, if 3D is not a replacement but its own art form, then 2D, we can recognize that 2D is also its own art form. We can bring it has room to stay. And there's been a lot of movies and such where they actually combine the two, where some assets are in 3D, but they keep like a 2D style to it. And it's just like people just really yearn for innovation in art because our world's drab now. So it's like bring back the life, bring something new, take from the old, bring something new, and we could just have just a more colorful and interesting world to live in and be surrounded by.
Very true. Very well said, Danica. Very well said. And jumping to the next question, I'm actually going to give context for this one. So I've been doing this show now for about 6-7 years, and I've had the opportunity to meet incredible people, a lot of authors, editors, now narrators, and now illustrators and artists. And I've learned a lot from them. I've learned a great many things. And from these people, I've learned that a good majority of those that I featured, we all began our careers professionally within the last 5 years during the lockdown era. And this has sparked a discussion which I am very curious if you may have heard something similar in the artist world. And that is this discussion of whether or not we're in a golden age or an iron age. I'll give reasons for this. Many proponents of the golden age argument is that lockdown was a terrible time for everybody. No one was able to interact with anyone physically, and ultimately, we all had to find new passions to keep ourselves busy. And this led to a lot of people turning to books, making podcasts and stuff like that. And ultimately, when the floodgates opened, the industry was blown away by these new creatives, new talents in the industry. And I was one of them. I began my career professionally back in 2020. And looking back, I believe that it was a golden age, but I now see towards the Iron Age, New Age argument, which proponents for that argue that this industry is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It is not easy to get into, and ultimately, you have those who simply created something just to create something. They didn't do this to gain new skill sets or build upon it. They just want to create something to exist. And the market has been very saturated, if not overly saturated, with these numerous voices. Thus, that is why people argue that we are in an iron age, because we were able to weed out those who weren't as passionate with those who are. Ultimately, Danica, here's the question. From your personal experiences, do you believe that we are in a golden age or more so of an iron age or possibly a mix of both?
That is a good question. It really depends on where you're looking, I suppose. I guess if you want to take animation specifically as an example, because the studios have not been hiring for the past 3 years, ever since they overhired from COVID, they've been letting people go and having hiring freezes. That's where I associate that experience with like the Iron Age, because nobody's getting professional work in studios. But there is a recent golden age of independent animation where people are creating their own studios just to post on YouTube or something, and that gets a lot of views and that gets a lot of real fans. And that's been really successful. Like one big example is The Amazing Digital Circus, which started out as being on YouTube, but now they have their episodes on Netflix, which is like, that's a really huge win for indie animation, because that's
Yeah.
not something that we, you know, would associate with getting huge. You know, it's like the old formula was that you go to a studio and then you would work on their shows with their IPs, and then, you know, they're the ones with the big expensive marketing teams, and they're the ones that make it all big and stuff. But this is a very incredible change where you have a small studio with a lot of passion getting big just because a bunch of people like their work. And I think also that goes back to people wanting to see something new, because the professional big studios, they're all just making the same thing. People call that slop as well, just because it's just full of sequels that nobody asked for.
Mhm.
It's full of films with a bunch of unnecessary political propaganda that nobody asked for. There's a bunch of their professional projects have been rushed, and people can tell because the CGI looks awful.
Mhm.
Whereas in comparison, the indie animations, the stuff you see on YouTube, it's really high quality stuff. And it's like the story's really good and people are really resonating with it. And what you see on YouTube, it really felt like the cartoons back in like 2010, in like the 2010s, where it's like it's really good stuff made from people who love what they do.
Yes.
So it's kind of both, because it really depends on where you're looking. Like big Hollywood, they're going through an iron stage, but YouTube is going through a golden age, essentially.
That's actually a good way to look at it. And also, to go even further, you definitely have indie animation and small indie studios really pushing the envelope when it comes to animation. I know, and I'm sure you probably have learned this from your schooling and possibly from, experiences, that many people assume animation is meant to be child friendly or family oriented.
Mhm.
And while that is the case for a lot of big studio films, there's a lot of independent projects that are really pushing envelopes. Like, well, animation's a medium. You can't tell a mature story through animation. And I'm just going to give example of one, which is my personal favorite, though not from an indie company. It is from an established animator who, if you grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, you know I'm referring to, and that is Gendy Tartakovsky, the creator of Electric Laboratory, and more recently, the Emmy Award-winning director behind Primal, which that was an absolute gold mine. The story, world building, and there was something nostalgia about seeing 2D animation in an era dominated by 3D animation. Again, not to take anything away from 3D animation, we just have gotten so used to it. But 2D animation does bring about this nostalgia. And for anyone who has not seen Primal, I highly recommend checking it out. Though, fair warning, it is not for the faint of heart. Do not mistake it for a cartoon. It is a very violent, mature show in animation form, but it is so good.
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of the indie stuff I've seen, they're all marketed towards adults as well. It's like in their trailers or in their teasers, you know, there's blood or there's some cursing, and there's just a bunch of graphic content in it that you would not see typically in, you know, a child's cartoon. I've seen an Instagram reel recently of the comparisons between then and now, and how, you know, before, through traditional TV, you needed a specific demographic, specifically and preferably probably the ages between 10 to 12, and the main character would always be like, you know, a boy, because I think I've heard that girls tend to outgrow cartoons faster than boys. That's just a statistic that they have somewhere. So that's why they tend to be male led, because the boys are going to be watching cartoons longer than the girls would be. But now there's a big shift, and like a lot of the new shows that I see, they're female
Mhm.
leads, and it can range. It's a larger demographic of it can range between, could be as young as 10, could be as old as 35. You know,
Mhm.
it's just a big shift. It could also depend on like where we are now, and like a lot of 90s kids who grew up watching cartoons back when they had their golden age, and during that time they're now
Mhm.
all adults, and it's just like they want to see more of it. So like just the natural way the generations are and how they experience childhood to now, that could also affect things as well, now that I think about it.
Yes, very true. And actually, from that actually goes now into sort of like this discussion of, as you brought up, AI art, dominating the industry just the same as AI written books dominating the publishing industry. And it's a very unfortunate thing that we are living in. I know that has been a big, big no-no for everyone. And my stance on it, which I've said on this on numerous uh, shows, is that artificial intelligence, if you use correctly as a tool, is fine. If you use it to like organize your stuff and everything like that, that is okay. But I think what people have the biggest issue with AI is generative AI, where you generate something and market it as your own. That is a big
Mhm.
no-no, because it takes away the creative aspect, the struggles of what it means to be an author or an artist, because it mass produces it on a global scale, but it creates a false sense of creativity because it takes from other works, it takes from other artists, it takes from other stories, and tries to pass it off as its own. And for AI art, though it has gotten significantly better, which is terrifying in the last few years, you can still tell. And also this shift, which I would like to hear your thoughts on, AI being used to make commercials, as opposed to if you were making a commercial that was more animated and geared towards children, you would have a team of animators and illustrators working to get that ad ready. But as people see on YouTube and now on TV, that's no longer the case. And then again, I would like to hear your thoughts on it, and overall, what does it mean to you as an artist? Traditionally trained, you've done the schooling, you've done the work, but living in an era that's shifting away from the human aspect and more so pushing this, fast paced, we want it now, now, now mindset when it comes to AI.
Yeah, it is really scary, especially when you see like the actual generated works coming out, um, and it's just improving every day. But there is a slight hope for me that I feel like on my feed, it seems to be mostly a negative view on AI from most people. Like
Mm,
even both artists and non-artists, I noticed have an agreement that AI just sucks, and it sucks for everyone. I'm really interested in hearing why non-creatives and non-artists hate AI, because it's like, well, the question for them is, why does it matter to them? And to my surprise, it matters a lot to them. And some of the reasons include like, one, if you have a commercial that's AI generated, people can tell. And when people can tell, they're just like, great. So we're gonna take our hard-earned money and pay it towards a cheap product. They're
mm,
gonna assume AI is a cheap product because you can't even afford to get a professional crew to like film a professional commercial. You have to generate it yourself, and it's like it gives off a really cheap feel to it. And on top of that, not just a cheap feel, but also just the lack of care. it's like, oh, great, this company doesn't even care. They just want me to buy their product, and that's it. There's no relationship building going on here. And a lot of people sense that too. And that goes back to what I was saying about putting care into my work. It's like people can tell. Like the biggest example would be when Coca-Cola did their ad last Christmas and it was AI generated. People can tell. And people were quick to, boycott that if they needed to. It's just like, no, I don't want to buy your Cokes anymore. This is, you don't even care about us. And the topic of caring, like with the company caring about their consumers, some people have that image of like, they're a big corporate company. Why do they care about me? They clearly just want me to buy their product. And to an extent, that is true. But also a big example of how they would want to care is through Super Bowl commercials. The reason why Super Bowl commercials are so good and iconic is because the goal of the brands is not to sell you something, but rather to create a relationship, something that the consumers can laugh at or like connect with. So it goes, that example shows that it goes beyond just corporate selling you a brand. It's like, no, they do want to try to connect with you. And if you add AI into the mix, that's just not going to happen. People are going to call you cheap and they're going to just say you don't care because, well, clearly you don't. You created that in just a couple of hours. It's not going to get the result that most businesses want. And there's been a lot of, with all that backlash that people respond with when they see AI products, it does show not only in their anger on social media, but they're gonna tell these companies with their money too, with the boycotting. They're not gonna give you their money if they just sense that there's AI slop in here. Because I feel like I'm gonna be a repeating record here, but it's like just overall the summary. If you give a product that's just slapped on, no one's going to want your stuff. It's just that simple.
Very true. And that actually now perfectly segues into the business side of this industry. So let's start with a good little icebreaker question. So when you began this journey of yours, Danica, as a freelance artist, what really surprised you about the industry as a freelancer? And looking back on that now currently in your life, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of making your portfolio, figuring out what style of animation and illustration really spoke to you, anything like that?
I guess one of the things that surprised me the most is how much more business oriented I, as an illustrator, would have to be, because in order to get clients, you would want to market yourself and let people know that hey, number one, I exist, and number two, I can provide good quality service to you. And that's not something that's really taught when you go into college, and then the counselors, they'll tell you to go take these certain classes and take this certain road, and then you'll be good to go. But there is a missing aspect of no, you need a business mindset to an extent. You need at least some basic marketing to an extent, and also the connections too, how you connect with people. And by making certain connections, they could connect you with even more people, and that kind of causes a ripple effect to getting more people to know you and get your stuff. That is something that I wish, looking back on, I had more knowledge of, because if I'm being honest, that's still a big struggle I have right now, especially with social media changing their algorithm. So now it makes it even harder for people to see you. It's like, okay, now you have to work even more towards what the algorithm wants, so that you can get noticed. There are artists who say no, don't care about the algorithm, just do what you like to do. And it's I get it. You don't want to be overwhelmed by the algorithm. You don't want the algorithm to rule you over you. But at the same time, it is a reality that, like, hey, if you want to get noticed, at least follow the basic outline of like how you could do that, and then the rest of your natural personality and your natural talent could bleed through. Yeah.
Very true, Danica. So now let's talk about sort of your style of creating as an artist. What are some of like the influences that you've learned through school and through trial and error that really helped you find your voice as an artist? And as a freelancer, how have you been able to balance, your individuality, but also, let's say, for example, if you were hired to create a book cover for an indie author of this specific genre, and this specific genre has an expectation to the readers and supposed to look a certain way. That could be a lot of things to consider. So can you tell us about that aspect of you, the artist style that really showcases who you are and the struggles of showcasing that?
Yeah. So finding my personal style, well, first of all, I didn't really ponder on that question of finding a style too much, because it really was just how what do I feel when, creating a certain piece, or like the influences that I had from watching cartoons and then anime, and then mixing those experiences into how I'm drawing. It's really just like me subconsciously picking and choosing what I like from those specific styles, and then putting that onto paper in through my own hand. And it's because of that that can change over time, like not just in a sense of like, oh, I'm getting better at drawing in general, but just also that there's so many different styles to explore. It would be nice to just experiment with it. And that helps a lot when adapting a certain style to a client's work, because instead of being known for a specific style from, that I discovered myself, it's just that, oh, I'm adapting different kinds of styles, and I'm not really set on committing to one style. That with that, I could easily adapt to another person's project, because I'm not completely married to an idea of a specific style. It's like, no, if this style isn't needed, I just won't use it. I'll just find inspiration of what the client wants more of, and then I can study those different styles a little bit, and then try to make a copy of that kind of style in the best way that I can. So it's really just about not committing to styles. And honestly, preferably, I would avoid the question altogether, because in my opinion, it's just a waste of time. Just like take what you know and put that into your work, and then don't be afraid to like change it up every now and then. And then for the client, that's going to be very helpful, because you'll be able to easily adapt to certain styles.
That's a very good message. And honestly, as an author, I definitely resonate with that, with what you're saying. Like, not trying to go with any style, you could easily turn it into, you don't want to write, like the market of, what is epic fantasy or thriller. Take what you know, showcase it, and just adapt. You learn from the clientele, which for authors is the readers, the audience, and just build around it. Just the same as you've mentioned, Danica, where the client and the audience, they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you what works, what doesn't, and you have to adapt. You have to, really go along with, I don't want to say trend, but if you listen to your audience and listen to your clients, I think, I'm sure you'll definitely agree, you will definitely go far in the industry that you wish to be a part of. And we're almost near the end of this amazing interview, Danica. So I'm actually going to combine the last 4 questions into 2-parters. The first 2-part question is this. Whenever you're working on a project, Danica, how do you know when to stop working on it, but also make sure that the final product is satisfying not just to you, but also the client?
Mm, like, like stop working on it in what sense?
So let's say, as you mentioned earlier, that conversation between yourself and the client of new ideas. And you've been working on it, working on it, working on it, and you reach the end. But then let's say, oh, that idea, that may look good. And it possibly may, but that's more work that you're adding to yourself.
Mm,
Ultimately, when do you stop with sort of like the ideas or the inspirations and just accept that this is the perfect version or the version for this idea for this client, and just stopping, but possibly keeping that idea on the back burner for another project?
mm, yeah, when you put it that way, I would say you stop when you feel it's just not worth it anymore, where there's a certain budget to every project, and if you feel that you're starting to go over it, and if this client says that they're not able to compensate, then you just kind of have to put your foot down and say that's enough. We can try to have it in the back burner, and we can try to or combine the ideas, or we can um we can make the new idea in a way that it would be faster for me and more reasonable for me to work on. We could still talk about those, but for your own self dignity, you do have to put your foot down when it's when you feel that it's just too much work for what you're actually getting. And for beginner artists, I went through this as a beginner artist, where you accept certain conditions even though they shouldn't be acceptable, because you need the work, you need the experience. I understand that that can be very difficult for a person to do, with that people pleasing mentality, but
Mm,
over time you do learn to be tougher about things. When you've worked in something like this for a really long time, you start to understand more of the business itself, and more of okay, what is worth it, what is acceptable for me, um, and my labor, the conditions and boundaries that I'll accept and what is not. And that's like a trial and error sort of thing. And you do need special support sometimes, like emotionally, maybe friends reminding you that hey, this is enough. You're working too much for so little.
mm,
Um, over the past year, my day job actually has taught me that, because my day job put me in a position of leadership to an extent, where I just could not be a people pleaser.
mm,
I just had to put my foot down on certain occasions if I needed to do what I needed to do. And thankfully, those skills carried over to my client work and as an illustrator, where I finally had the confidence to say hey, no, this is no longer acceptable for my conditions. You just have to take it as it is, or we can modify your idea to make it more reasonable for me to do.
mm.
um yeah, it's just a matter of learning how to say no for those things.
Absolutely. And the final two-part question of this amazing and very informative interview is this, Danica. With everything you've learned in your career and will continue to learn as a freelance artist and author, what do you want people to take away from your work? And what pieces of advice would you like to instill upon the next generation of artists?
For the first part of that question, I would want the person looking at my work to feel like, oh, somebody can relate to me, and that there's something that we can, see eye to eye on. When I was a kid looking up to like cartoons and stuff, I watched a lot of TV because I was lonely, and I felt that there was like no one there that really understood how I felt. But a lot of the cartoons that I would watch had like these deep moments, and it's moments where it's like, oh, I kind of went through that as well. Um, so for my art, I kind of want to do the same thing for other people, where it's like, I want you to feel like, hey, we have things in common. That could be either through the personal stuff maybe that I could share through my work, or like culturally speaking, or just like, how I grew up. Maybe some people grew up in similar circumstances. I want a connection to be made there, and that some people can relate to the things that I go through.
Mm.
And for the second question, what was the second part again?
The second question was, what is your word of wisdom, your advice to future artists wanting to get into this industry?
Advice is just to be tough. There's gonna be people who, say you can't do it, or there's gonna be people that say like, hey, this place is a lost cause. Just give up now, jump ship. And if you truly believe that what you're doing is important work that you are doing, you just gotta sit tight. There's gonna be moments where you're gonna feel like the only person that has a certain belief or a certain passion for what you do, whereas everybody else kind of lost hope for what you're fighting for. It's just, keep fighting. Keep fighting, because what you're doing is important, and we do as a society need it. So yeah, don't give up.
Very true. Very well spoken, Danica. And a perfect ending to this incredible illustrator interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this amazing interview here on the show. A huge thank you to our guest, Danica Diamos, for making her official debut, and hopefully not the last time we have her on the channel. So again, Danica, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. Before we end, where can people find you on social media if they wanted to connect, reach out to you? And do you have any upcoming projects that you would like to announce that you would like to share?
Yeah, well, you can mostly find me on Instagram. I go by Soy Sauce 2011. You can just look up my real name as well, Danica Diamos on Instagram. I have other socials posted on my link tree in the bio, but it's just easier to start off with Instagram, since that's where I get the most engagement and where I post the most. And yeah, new projects. I am currently volunteering for young artists program. I'm just they have like this event, I think every October, and they asked me to illustrate something for them. So that's what I've been working on right now, and they'll have it ready before Halloween.
Nice, nice. I'll be linking all that down below in the description of this video. And if you are an author looking for a character artist to make your character come to life, definitely reach out to Danica. I'll provide all that down below in the description of this video. And if you'd like to see Danica again in another episode, possibly a special, comment down below and I will try to make it happen. As always, viewers and listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another amazing episode here on the channel. A huge thank you to Danica for coming on the show, being the first illustrator on Tales from the Wandering Scribe, and hopefully not the last. As always, it's been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you all next time.